Hi all, is my screen visible to everyone? Alright. In our last class, what we have looked at is we have basically looked at the record level security. Alright. As a part of that discussion that we have gone through, we have looked at what is role hierarchy, what is role, and how can records that are owned by an employee can be shared with the manager. That is what we have seen, and we have also established the org by default settings, which is nothing but our OWD, which basically defines what would be the base level of access that a user can get once he logins into the Salesforce. All right. Those are the two items that we have discussed. All right. In today's class, what we are going to look at is we are going to look at sharing rules, which is a third part in our record level security. All right. So what are sharing rules? Sharing rules can be used on who owns the record or on the values of the fields in a record. Alright. So when we'll be using the sharing rules is in case, remember our example where X wants to share his records with another group of people. Alright. So X wants to share his records with Y, Z, and A. Alright. If there is a scenario where he wants to share his records for let's say for review reasons or for other reasons, then he can always opt for the sharing rules. All right, then he can opt for sharing rules in the system. So we have completed role hierarchy. Role hierarchy is nothing but checking the checkbox that is just beside your OWD. All right. So we have already gone through that. In case if you have missed out, that concept is completed. Alright. So the sharing rules is mainly meant for sharing that record that I own, alright, to another set of users. It can be done in two ways. One is basically depending on who is owning that record, that person can expose that record or that person can give that record to the others, or he or she can share that record with others, right? And the second way of sharing that records in a sharing rule is depending on the value that we have, you can share that records with other people. Alright. So that is what the sharing rule is about. Sharing rule can be defined based on who is owning that record or on the values that are there on the fields for a given record. For example, use sharing rules to extend the sharing access to a user in a public group or roles. As with the role hierarchy, sharing rule never can be stricter than your org by default setting. Alright. Remember the diagram that we have seen where you can extend the number of records that are being visible to your end user, but you cannot restrict as in when you move up. Alright, as in when you move up. Alright. So that is what your sharing rule is talking about, or that is what this point is talking about in terms of sharing rules. It is saying that sharing rules can never be stricter than your org by default or OWD setting. Right? So that means you can extend the access using your sharing rules, but you cannot restrict it using your sharing rules. You cannot restrict the number of records that are visible to your end user using your sharing rules, but you can always extend the number of records that are visible to him. Right? They just allow the greater access to a particular user. It says you cannot restrict the user you cannot restrict the number of records that are being visible to your end user using your sharing settings. You can always extend the number of records that are visible to him using your sharing rules. Alright. If you see, there is a diagram that I have here which says sharing between two people. Alright, it is like this. I have a data givers group, and I have a data receivers group. Alright. So the data givers are the people who are willing to share their records with other set of people, and the data receivers are the people who are basically taking those records. Right? So, Srivindya, we are going to that topic of what is a public group. In case if you are really worried about what is a public group and how we can use it, this is the explanation that you need to understand. Alright. So now we have a data givers group, the people who are willing to give their records or they want to share their records with the other set of people, and there are these data receivers who want to basically receive the records and they want to look at those records. Alright, there is a data givers group and there is a data receivers group. Alright. So the idea of the sharing rules is to basically expose the number of records that are being held by this data givers to the data receivers group. Alright. So how to configure your sharing settings? Sharing settings will also be under your security control under your sharing settings. Click on it. Alright. So here is the place where you can configure your sharing rules. Alright. Here is the place where you can configure the sharing rules. Alright. So this is one screen for all your record level security. Right. You can do your org by default from here, and record level, you can do your org by defaults from here, right? And you can do your role hierarchy from this column which says grant access using hierarchy. And if you scroll down a little, and here is where you can write your sharing rules. Here is the place where you can write your sharing rules, right? So what I'll do is I'll basically find out a object where we can write sharing rules. So I'm just searching for one object with name. Alright. So I have this object called field support, which is nothing but a technician object. Alright. The reason why I've picked this object is just to highlight one point. Alright. So how to create a sharing rules in Salesforce? Identify the object that you want to write the sharing rules on. Alright. You can go to that section. You can search for that object and get to that section. And you can get to know what all sharing rules that are already written in the system. In case if you want to write a new sharing rules, you can click on this new button. Alright, you can click on this new button. Alright, so the steps for creating your sharing rules is, the first step is basically giving a name to your sharing rule. Alright, you can name your sharing rule from this section. I'll say that share to public. What I'm naming my sharing rule here, I want to share the Hyderabad records with the public group August that we have created yesterday. Alright. So what I want to do is, any record which is having the list value as city equal to Hyderabad, there is a field called city on this object called field support. Alright. So field support is a technician object. Alright. So here I have a field called city. Right. So now what I want to do is, I want to identify all the records which are having city equal to Hyderabad, and I want to share it with one public group. Alright. What would happen if I share it with a public group? The people who are inside that public group, be it a user or be it another public group which is inside it, they'll get the access to this record which they might not have earlier access to. Right? They don't have an access to this record earlier. Now what we are doing, we are just extending the access to that public group so that this records which is having the city equal to Hyderabad, those records will be shared with them. Those records will be shared with that public group that we have created yesterday or day before yesterday. Alright. So first thing that what we have did, we have given a name to our sharing rule saying that this is what I want to do, and you can always fill out that description in this. You can always extend, or you can always write your thoughts of why we are creating this sharing rule in this description section. Alright, saying that I want to share this record which has the city equal to Hyderabad with this public group. Right? You can also mention the reason for that. Alright. So if you ask me what would be the reason, your business will basically give you that reasons of why certain records needs to be shared with certain set of people. Alright. So that reasons you can mention it in your description. In the second step, what it exactly says is, you can share your records. Depending on two categories. First one is based on your owner record owner. Based on your record owner, like we have discussed, for every object there would be an owner. You can basically share those records depending on that owner. Alright. In our example, I want to share the records that are owned by X with Y, Z, and A. How can I do that? I can say that the records that are owned by X, and I want to share it with the data receivers group. The data receivers group is nothing but the public group that we have created in our last class. Right? So that is one way of sharing it. Another way of sharing it, as per the definition, is it is via field value. It is via field value. So what I have done is, this time I switched to a second category which says based on a criteria. Alright. So now I see a third step which says select which records to be shared. It is asking me what is that criteria that you want to take into consideration so that those records will be shared with another group of people. Alright. So I'll simply say that if I want to share Hyderabad records, I'll select the city as Hyderabad. City equals, from this pick list value, city is a pick list value that we have created on this object. I'll select it as Hyderabad. Now what happens is, any record which is having city is equal to Hyderabad will be coming into this box called data givers, and that information has to be shared with another set of people which are nothing but your data receivers group. Right? Data receivers group. Right? So you can either do it from your owner, where you say that this is the owner that I want to pick and I want to share it with that particular user. Alright. And if you want to do it with your criteria, you can always select the field from that object. It is not just country, you can do it on any field that you have on that particular object. Alright. I'm just taking an example here where it says city is equal to Hyderabad. You can also do it for cities other than Hyderabad. Alright. It is just depends on your business scenario where you want to understand which all records that you want to share with the other set of people. Right? So that is your third step. Now what has happened is, you have given a name, you have decided what type of sharing rule that you want to write, and you have defined the criteria for it if it is a criteria based sharing. And the fourth step is, you need to tell the system to which group you want to share it with. Right? You can share it with public groups, you can share it with roles, you can share it with roles and internal subordinates. Right? You can share it with roles and internal and portal subordinates. Alright, these are all the roles that we have seen in our previous class. Alright, it is saying that do you want to share it with the roles or people who are inside that roles as. Alright, so that is what these three roles are talking about. Right, we know roles and internal subordinates and portal subordinates are nothing but the roles that we have in the system. Alright. Now, so what is the usage of your public group? In case if you want to club different users, we have understood the concept called public group. Now what I want to do is, now I want to share the records which is having cities equal to Hyderabad with that particular group that I have created. What I can do is, I can basically make use of the public group that I have, and I can simply select that public group from this list. Instead of manually saying that this is the user that I want to share the records with, I can simply say the public group from this list. Right, remember we have created this public group called August in our previous class, where we have added certain users there. Alright, Now what I'm doing is, I'm getting all the records which is having cities equal to Hyderabad from that particular object. It is nothing but the field support object, and I'm sharing with this public group called public group August. Alright, so that is your fourth step. You are getting the data, the data givers group, and you are sharing the data with the data receivers group, which is nothing but the public group that we have defined in our previous class. Alright. The fifth step talks about, now you are sharing that records. Do you want them to edit that record, or do you want them to just read through that data? Right. Now you are sharing the data. So now system is asking you or asking us what is the level of access that we want to give to that particular sharing that we are doing. Right? If you are sharing that records, you need to tell the system that whether you are doing it for just a read-only purpose, where the other users can read that information but they cannot edit that information. In case if you want to give them the edit access as well, that is where you can select read-write option, and all you need to do is at the end click on save. Alright. So system would take some time to calculate that information, and there would be an email that will be coming to your mail ID saying that the sharing rules are being completed. Sharing rules evaluation is being completed, and those records are being shared according to the logic that we have written. Alright. Now what happens is any record under this field support object which has the city is equal to Hyderabad, those records will be shared with this public group called public group August. Right? And we are giving what level of access? We are giving read-write access to the people who are in this public group. Who are all the people that we have added in this public group? We have added Sandeep, CEO, May 22 group as a public group. All right. So these all people will have read-write access on this records which is having city is equal to Hyderabad. Right? City is equal to Hyderabad. Now, if you ask me any scenario where this public group or where this sharing rules will come into play is, let's say there would be a kind of a review group, or a people who are kind of a subject matter expertise. They want to look at the cases or the work orders that we are closing. As a technician, if I'm closing a work order, or if I'm closing a case, if I'm closing a business deal as a quotation or an order, right? If I'm closing that, I want a third set of eyes to basically look at that information, whether I'm following all the best practices or not. In that case, what we'll do is we'll basically write the sharing rule saying that the records that are being created from this people, or you can basically identify the criteria saying that if it is a kind of a opportunity that we have, you can identify the field that we have which can be taken into consideration. You can talk to your business and identify that field and say that if opportunity is new and if it is basically being closed, or if it is basically moved to a kind of a pending status, you can take that status and say that opportunity status is equal to pending, then share it with this group. These people who are in that group will look into that opportunity and they'll give you a guidance to this person. If it is a case, if the case is open for quite a long time, and if it is still in progress, you can always say that if case status is in progress and some more criteria, let's say if case status is in progress and the number of days exceeded by 3 days or something, then you can always share it with this group of people and they will look into that case and they'll give you guidance on how to close that case. Alright, so that is how you can basically make use of your sharing rules. Alright, it is always to extend the number of records that a user has access to. It is always to extend that number. It can be done in two ways. One is from your owner, and second one is from your criteria. Criteria can be the field value that we have, field value that we have in the object, and depending on that, you can basically share that records with the data receivers. Data givers are the people who are basically giving that data. If it is a criteria, you will say that city is equal to Hyderabad, or you will say that country is equal to India, share it with this people, right? So that is how you can make use of your sharing rules, where you want to expose that records depending on their need. Right? One more scenario that I can give you is you want to basically share all the cases that have been created within that region. Let's say if there is a group called India Technician Group. In case if you want to share all the records that are created within the India with these people, what you can say is on that work order object, you can basically make use of that city field, say, or you can make use of the country field saying that if a country is equal to India, then share it with this Indian group. If the country is equal to US or something, you'll share it with that particular group. If it is country is equal to Bangladesh, you can basically create a public group and add all the Bangladeshi people who are working on that technician side into that group, and you can basically share those records with them. Right? Depending on their availability, they'll pick up their records and work on it. Right? That is how you can basically make use of your sharing. If we give read and write access to the sharing, then would it be a security issue? So that you need to identify or talk to your business and understand if it is a read access that you need to give to them, or it's just a read write access. Right? So your business needs to give you those inputs. You and I cannot decide what would be the security cost. In case if they really want to edit it, and if I'm not giving that, then there is no point of sharing those records with them, right? It is all depends on your business requirement, right? So this topic is mainly meant for helping you understand how can you extend that access. And if you ask me real-time scenarios, it all depends on your business. One scenario that I might give you might not work for other business. All right. So one business might say that all technicians needs to look at all the work orders that are there in the system. Or one business might say the sales rep needs to look at all the opportunities. Right? So other business might say that only the opportunities created by them should be visible to only that particular person. You don't need to use your sharing rules to extend that access. Right? So depending on your business and the scenario that you have, you'll basically make use of the tool set that we are discussing, or the concepts that we are discussing, and you will apply them accordingly. Right? That is your sharing rules. There would be a data givers group. The data givers group would be your owners, or it could be the criteria that you have on the top. And the data receivers are the people who are basically taking those records and working on them. It could be the read access. It could be the read access that you can give it to them, or you can basically give them the read write access. You can give them the read write access. Alright. So that is all about your sharing rules. The idea is to get some set of records and share it with the other group of people, right? That is your sharing. Now, we have another concept which is manual sharing. There is another concept called manual sharing, and one thing that you need to understand is it works only in Classic. It works only in Classic, and this option is being disabled in your Lightning. You cannot basically get this access in your Lightning. Alright. So the difference between this manual sharing and that sharing rules is this applies for a single record. Manual sharing works for single record. If you want to basically share one record with a group or a user or a set of users, then you'll go with your manual sharing. If it is a bulk of records that you want to share with a group of people, then you'll go with your sharing rules. The key difference between the sharing rules and the manual sharing is, if you want to share a bulk of records with a bunch of users, then you'll go with your sharing rules. If you want to share one record with a group of people, that is where you'll go with your manual sharing. Alright. So one common scenario that we all can agree upon is, in case if a person X is going on leave, the data or the work that is been assigned to him should not be kept on hold, right? If he's going on a PTO, the work should not, if he's going on a leave, the work that is given to him should not be kept on hold, because your client or your end customer doesn't know whether the person who is working on this case is on a holiday or not, right? The business should not stop because of one person going on a leave, right? So in that cases, what we can do is we can make use of this manual sharing to share that work that has been assigned to that person who is on leave with the other person, so that he or she can basically look into that issue till the time this person comes back to office. Alright, so that is the advantage of your manual sharing. Alright, so it says manual sharing allows user to grant one of the access to their individual records for the user's roles or a public role. Manual sharing is available to the record owners, their managers in the role hierarchy, and the system admins, right? So if you think through the second statement, it might make sense. If I am going on a sick leave, and the work is been assigned to me, let's say there are two cases that are assigned to me, and I'm going on a sick leave, right? Then will it make sense for the business to ask this person who is going on a sick leave to basically come online to share his records with the other set of people? It might not make sense, because he will be applying a sick leave because he or she is not feeling well. Alright. Same applies here. So what Salesforce has thought through is, since manual sharing would be to share the work because he or she might not have that time, or they might not have the right resources for that day to work on it. So what they have thought through is, the manual sharing can be done by the record owner. If I am the owner of the record, if I am going on a sick leave or a planned vacation, then what I can do is I can share the records that I own with other people. In that case, going on a vacation is fine because it's a planned item. You can share that work that you have with other people beforehand. If it is a sick leave, what you can do is I might not be able to log in into the system. So what I can do is I can ask my manager to share that work for me. Instead of me logging into the system and doing that access or doing that sharing, I can ask my manager to share that work with other people. And if manager is also not available, I can reach out to the system admins and he or she can basically do that sharing for me. They can do that sharing for me. Alright. Now, how to do the manual sharing? If you go to any of the object, you will be seeing this sharing button here. You'll be seeing this sharing button here. Alright. If you click on that button, it basically takes you to this page. It takes you to this page where it says add or expand list. And if you want to add people into this list, what exactly would happen if you add a person or a group into this list? The people who are added into this list will have access to this record. These people in this list will be having access to this record. What level of access you can always determine by deciding that value from creating the record from this add button. So what you can do is you can decide what level of access that you want to give. By clicking on this add button, there would be an option which says read or read write. You can always decide what level of access that you want to give to the end user. Right? So how can you add a public group that we have already created to this one? All you can do is click on add, and here would be a list of public groups. Or if you want to share it based on a user, you can select the users here and add the people to whom you want to share this record with. I want to share it with this CEO as a user, and I want to share it with, let's say, COO, right? I want to share it with that role, and if you want to share it based on a public group, you can always do that. Right? I'm just randomly adding some public group here. So you can share it with the user, you can share it with the role, you can share it with the public group. Now, once you are done with the selection of the items or the people to whom you want to share this record with, you can always decide what level of access that you want to give it to them. Whether it is a read-only access or a read-write, you can always select that information and you can click on save. Now what happens is this record will be visible to the people who are under this role called COO, and it is also visible to this user called CEO, and there is also a kind of a manual sharing that we did, which is basically exposing this record to this public group demo March. Alright, and if you ask me what are these public groups and how they are getting the access, this is coming from your sharing rules. From the sharing rules, like I've said, this particular record has the city is equal to Hyderabad, and that is where I've told the system to share this record with a public group, which we have defined in our sharing settings. Right? So that is the other things that are coming up on that screen apart from the configurations that we did. Right? So these are the two public groups which are coming on the screen. Alright, which are coming up on the screen where it says that this particular record has been shared with that public groups, right? These public groups from your sharing rules, it explicitly says that it is a sharing rule that has been applied, and if it is a manual sharing, if you are clicking add button and adding the number of users or adding the users to whom you want to share this record, it would basically mention the reason why this record is being shared with that particular person, and it would say manual sharing for manual sharing, and it would say custom object sharing if it is a sharing rule that has been in place to share this record with that particular users. Right? So it defines based on what is the thing that you have done, this record has been shared with this people, and it also gives you the access, whether it is a read write that you are using or a read permission that you are using to share that records with them. Right? So that is your manual sharing. One quick scenario, like I've said, if a person is going on a vacation, he can share the records with the other people who are working on that particular day. Or else if he is going on a sick leave, he or she can reach out to the manager saying that he is on a sick leave. That manager would be able to do the same thing that I've shown you earlier. Right? He can click on this add button and he can share that record with the people who are available on a given day. Right? So that is how your business will not stop just because one person is going on a sick leave. Right? So that is your manual sharing. Right? That is your manual sharing. To summarize, we have 4 levels of sharing in your record level sharing. First one is your OWD, which is your base level of sharing. Second one is your role hierarchy, where you share the records with the next level of people, which could be your manager or it could be your director, depending on which role that you are sitting in your organization. Third one is your sharing rules, where you have a data givers and data receiver group. You would identify the records based on a criteria or depending on an owner, and you will share it with the public group that we have created earlier. That is your sharing. This is bulk data that you want to share it with a certain set of users. In case if you are dealing with a single record where you want to share that record with other set of people, that is where you can use your manual sharing. So that that particular one record will be shared with a certain set of people depending on the list that you have created. Right? You can prepare that list by clicking on add and giving the necessary permission to them. Right? So that is your way of exposing that records to your users. That is how you will expose your records to your end users by using your record level security. Right? So that is all we have for the record level security. Alright. So just by concluding this topic, we have covered the entire security model of our Salesforce. Right. We have started with OR, then we have looked at the application access. We have decided who can see what level of applications, who can see which all applications from your profile level, and we have understood the object level access, or we have understood the object level security, which is nothing but telling the user what he can do on a given object. And then we have looked at our field level security, which defines what a user can do on a given field, whether he can see that field or whether he can edit that field, or he is not able to see that field. We can decide it from the field level, which will be controlled by your profile. Alright. All the things that I have discussed so far, the application, object, and the field, will be controlled from your profile. And at times this org level also can be decided. Org level settings can also be decided from your profile. Alright. And last but not the least, which is nothing but your record level security, this talks about if I have 10 records in the system for a given object, will the end user see all the 10 records? Alright. So if your business wants to show all the 10 records to the end user, you don't have to do much. You can set your OWD to public read write. Alright. So depending on what level of records that your user needs to see, you will define your entire structure in a way that only those records will be shared to them. If it is a base level of user, if he needs to see only 2 records, you need to expose only 2 records to him. If it is a manager, if he needs to look at his data plus the employee's data using your role hierarchy, you can expose the records to them. Expose to the records that are owned by your employees to your manager. If it is something to do with the bulk data sharing, you can always use your sharing rules, where you define the rule, and depending on the rule, that list of records will be fetched and they will be shared with the public group that you have defined. And last but not the least, we have this manual sharing, where you say that if a person is not available or if he's having so much of work, he can share his work just by making use of the manual sharing that we have in the system, where he or she can expose that information, or he or she can expose that record to the others, even though they don't have access to it. Right? So that is what your record level sharing will do. Right? So since we have completed the entire discussion about the security module in Salesforce, feel free to go through that entire module once. That is where you'll get to know the understanding of how my OWD is influencing my security, how my OWD is basically playing a role in the system. Alright. Then you will extend that OWD with your role level role hierarchy just by exposing that records to your owner. Alright. And if you want to extend that records depending on a criteria, you can always use your sharing rules. That is where you can share this record with another set of people. And if there is a single record requirement where you need to share with other people, you can always rely on your manual sharing. You can always rely on your manual sharing. Alright. So those are all the things that you need to know. Alright. Regarding your record level security plus the security aspect of Salesforce. Alright. I would pause here to see if there are any questions. If not, we can go on to the next topic, which is nothing but our automation concept in Salesforce. Right. I would quickly pause here for a minute to see if there are any questions in the entire security model discussion. We have almost took 5 days to cover this topic. Right. I've provided you all the details that you need. All you need to do is understand one topic at a time and see how it is impacting as a whole. Right. So you understand brick by brick, and then you put everything together. See what you are trying to build out of the settings that you have configured. Right. Right. That is your security model. Now, what we have done so far, from the time when we have connected, we have basically gone through the objects where we can save that information. Then we have created a tab where we can expose that object to the end user. Then we have clubbed similar tabs under one concept called apps. Alright. Then we have clubbed all the tabs that we have created. If they are serving certain functionality, we have brought them into one umbrella called app. Then what we did? Then we have written some validation rules. Plus we also created our fields depending on a scenario. Post that, what we did, we have connected objects depending on our requirement. And next topic that we have seen is record types and the page layouts, where we can design the fields that we want to show it on the layout. And plus what we have seen once we have done the record types and all, we have also seen the list views where you can filter or where you can show a filter set of records to your end user. And post that, what we have seen is security model in Salesforce. Post that, what we have seen is the last topic that we have discussed, which is nothing but the security model. Alright. Now, so SF admin and security has other topics to cover. So Vijay, I'm not sure like what you mean by SF admin and the security has other topics to cover. If you can rephrase that, I'll be able to answer that question. Right? If you are saying that is there the only activities of an admin to handle the security part, is that the only activity? The answer is no. There would be multiple activities that would be coming in the way of the admin. It could be arranging the field on a page layout. It could be creating a new record. There will be so many things that would be coming up. What are the topics included? So far the topics that we are discussing so far will be coming under your admin concept. Right? Admin as a role, these are all the things that you need to have in mind so that you can basically handle all the requirements or handle all the requests that comes to an end. Alright. Right. Now, so far we were doing everything manually, right? If I have to create a record, I was doing it manually. If I have to update a field, I was doing it manually. If I have to basically alert a user, I have to basically look into the system. If there is a high priority case that has been created, I need to look into the system from my list views and identify the case numbers, and I need to alert the team accordingly so that they can pitch in and help me resolve that cases. So far the things that we have done so far is everything manual. There is no kind of an automation that we have used so that we can get certain things done automatically from the system. Alright. Now, what we are going to discuss in next couple of days is we are going to look at the automation concept or automation part of Salesforce. Right? Why we need automation is the automation helps us standardize the internal procedures and the process. So why we are doing it? In order to save the time across the org. If I already know there are certain things that should happen depending on a field value, what I can do, instead of asking the user to do all the things manually, I can ask the system to take it on behalf of the person. Alright. So if I'm asking the user to do 100 clicks on a page to save that information, it would be too much for him, because he might be doing certain things in parallel. So it might be talking to a client, he might be pitching some idea to his client, or he might be talking to an end customer who is facing an issue. It would be too much on us to basically ask him to do certain things if it is a repetitive task. So then what we can do is we can leverage the concept called automation. Alright, then you can say that if there is a repetitive task that is there, you can always rely on the system to basically handle it for you. Alright, as a part of that automation, what we have is we have a first topic called as workflow rules. Right, the first topic in our automation is nothing but our workflow rules. Right, so what exactly is a workflow rule? It basically lets us automate the standard internal processes. If there is a kind of a process that a business has, right, you can basically automate that, and that will help us save the time. That will help us save the time of the person who has to do that activity. Plus, it will also make sure that there are no errors or there are no mistakes that have been committed by the end user. Right. So if a technician has to fill out a kind of a four fields, all right, and this 4 fields is a repetitive task, right? So depending on one field, if you can calculate the other fields, what you can do is you can basically tell the system that, hey system, this is the information that you can take in. If this is the information that you have, you can basically populate the other 4 fields. Just by doing so, what would happen is you will save the time of a technician, and system would make sure that if you write a code, or if you configure that workflow rule in such a way that it would be taking care of filling out the other fields that the technician should ideally fill in a manual way. Right? So just by asking the system to handle it, technician would fill one field and rest all fields will be populated by your workflow or the automation concept. Right? As a part of automation, the workflow rule is the first one that we are going to learn. Right? So as a part of workflow rules or as a part of automation, first thing that we are saving time, and the second thing is we are making sure that the end user or the person who is using that application is not committing any mistakes. Right? So in order to understand this concept better, I have a scenario where I'll go to a case object. All right, and there is this record. All right, so if I open that record, what I can see is there are like a couple of fields on a case object. Right. So now what I want is there is this high priority field which we have already seen earlier while creating or while discussing our list view concept, which has these values as high, medium, and low. Now what I want the system to do is, if there is any case that has been created with the type is equal to electric, alright. If there is any case that is being created with the type is equal to electrical, then I want to put the priority of a case to high. Irrespective of whether the CS user is setting this priority value to high or not, I want the system to handle that. As soon as the type, which determines by the issue that is being faced by your end user, if the end user is facing an issue with the electrical part of your system, then he'll report a case saying that I'm having an issues with my electrical side of my system. Right? He might say that my system is not powering up. Right? So it could be your MRI machine, it could be your laptop, it could be anything. Right? So if there is something to do with the circuit board, then he'll report an electrical issue. Right? If it is something to do with the mechanics of the system, right? If there is an MRI machine, it has to move inside, take the person in, and then take an X-ray, then take an MRI scan of that person. Right? There is a mechanics that has been involved. If that is not working, he'll report a issue saying that it is a mechanical. Now what I want is, as a business, ABC business, if I'm into that hospital sector, right, any equipment that I have, if it is connected to a power supply. If there is an issue with that particular device, I don't want the other systems to be basically stopped because of my machine. If there is an issue with my machine and it is basically burning the entire circuit board of that particular room, right? So in that room, if there is an MRI machine, there could be some other equipments which are valuable, right? Valuable as in it is valuable in terms of keeping the person's life alive, right? So there might be some critical machines which needs to be running 24/7, right? If this machine is basically burning the entire switchboard or the master board, what would happen? The other equipments that are connected to the same main supply would also get impacted. Alright, so that is why what I want is, if there is any electrical issue that is being reported by my customer, I want the case to be set to high priority. I want the case field called priority to set to high, right? So that is my requirement. Now, what happens after setting this priority to high? I want to send an email alert to certain set of people so that they can act accordingly onto this case. Right. The first thing is, as soon as there is a case that has been created with type is equal to electrical, I want to set the priority value to high. I want to set the high priority to a case. Second activity that I want to do is, whenever there is a case with type is equal to electrical, I want to send out an email to certain set of people in the organization so that they can act accordingly whenever they see this email, right? So whenever they get this email, they get to know that there is a high priority case that has been created in the system. They should act immediately, alright? So those are the two things that we want system to handle for us. Irrespective of whether the user is setting, irrespective of whether the CS person is setting this priority to high value or not, I want the system to handle this, alright? So if you go through that definition of workflow rule, what it will help us is, it will help us automate the standard internal procedures and the processes. Here the standard internal process is, if the type is equal to electrical, I want to set the priority of my case to high, right? And what it will do is, it will save the time across the organization, right? So if the type is equal to electrical, if I know that the system is handling by setting the priority to high, do I need to edit this field and set this value to high? There is no need of it, because system itself will handle that request for, right? So that is where your workflow rule or the automation concept is helping us save the time across your organization. Imagine if the CS user is taking 2 seconds to basically click this field and update this information to high, right? 2 seconds to basically complete this activity, or 3 seconds. And imagine there are, let's say, 20 cases that are coming his way every day, right? So how many seconds? 3 seconds into 20 cases in a given day, equal to 60 seconds. So just by asking the system to handle it, how many minutes that we have saved? We have basically saved 1 minute, if I'm not wrong, right? We have saved 1 minute. Imagine if the same thing continues for 1 year, right? 365 days into 1 minute will basically give you 365 minutes, right? If you see, there will be 6 hours of time that has been saved, right? Imagine if you can basically understand all the internal processes that are being laid out by that ABC company or for your project that you are working for, you can basically save lots of time across your organization, right? We just talked about one person. What if there are like 20 CS reps who are working on that project, right? Or if there are 20 sales customer support people working on that particular company, it would be 20 into those many hours, right? So this lots of valuable time. It's a lot of valuable time that we are saving for an organization. Right? All right. And that is how you can basically save some time to your organization. Right? So in tomorrow's class, what we'll do is we'll basically work on this workflow rules, where we'll understand how to configure it, how can we ask the system to handle that request. Plus, we'll also work on one more item, which is nothing but email template. Alright, why we need that email template? As part of our discussion, if I just set this priority to high, no one will get to know that there is a high priority case that has been created until the point if they move to a case tab and look for the high priority cases that are created in the system. Right? If they come into the system and if they look into this list view that we have created, which has all the high priority cases, that is where they'll get to know there is a high priority case that is created in the system. What if I want to alert them even though they are away from the system? What if I want to alert the people saying that there is a high priority case that is being created in the system? That is where we learn a concept called email templates, where we create that template and send an email to them so that they can look into their emails and come back to the system and see what is the issue that a end user is facing. Right? So we'll take this case as an example in tomorrow's class and we'll take it from there. Right? So to summarize what all things that we have discussed today, we have basically gone through the concept called sharing rules, where you will share a bunch of records with a group of people. And the second thing that we have learned is manual sharing, where you will basically share a given record or a single record with a bunch of people or a single user. Alright, so those are the things that we have learned. And last but not the least, the topic that we have just understood theoretically, or we have understood the automation need in Salesforce just by going through one scenario, which is nothing but if there is a case with type is equal to electrical, I want the system to set the priority to high and also send an email to the certain set of people. Right? Who are those certain set of people? How to configure? How to basically send an email alert, or how to set the priority to high automatically is what we are going to see in tomorrow's class. Right? Having said that, so I'll open up the session for Q&A. In case if you have any questions, feel free to ping me and I'll take those questions. Alright, in case if you don't have any questions, feel free to drop off. We can connect tomorrow.